Welcome to Restaurant Influencers presented by Entrepreneur. My name is Sean Walcha, founder of Cali BBQ and Cali BBQ Media. In life, in the restaurant business, and in the new creator economy, we learn through lessons and stories. Today, we have an absolutely incredible episode for you guys. We have Andy Hooper, the CEO of Heart House. You can find them at Heart House. That's My Heart House. MYHARTHOUSE. They are killing it on Instagram. They're killing it on TikTok, killing it on all the social platforms. But more importantly, they're building an incredible business. You can find Andy at A_W_Hooper. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate you having me today. Excited.
This is a long time coming. I've been following the brand on all the different platforms, and what you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. Well, we're going to start with our favorite random question, which is, where in the world is your favorite stadium, stage, or venue?
Ooh, love that. So I knew this was coming because I saw the podcast with Kim talking about Seattle.
Yeah.
I'm a Seattle kid too. But I'm going to run it back to college and say the original Orange Bowl in Miami, which is no more. Yes.
Okay.
One of the greatest places to watch a game, hands down.
We're gonna bring it back to the original Orange Bowl. We're gonna make that happen. We're gonna put on a hospitality conference, invite everybody that listens to the show, leaders from all over the world. We're gonna put you on the 50-yard line, and I'm gonna ask you to share your Kevin Hart story. Tell me, when did you find out? When were you first tapped to be the CEO of Heart House?
So I met Kevin about a year ago now. And the craziest part of the first meeting was that it was with him backstage at the Crypto.com arena in LA before his first show on the Reality Check tour, the tour that he's still doing now a year later that has him out overseas and around the world. And I think one of the things that struck me about the idea was the fact that he was willing to do and devote an hour of his time, right before going on stage in front of 20,000 people, to talking about this idea and to having a one-on-one meeting to talk about what Heart House could be and why he was going to spend any time on it at all. Because candidly, my first question was like, why do you need this, right? Like, restaurants, as you know well, are not exactly a get-rich-quick scheme. And so, especially for somebody who honestly probably has more to lose than to gain, at least on the surface, my question was like, why? And I think we came to a really solid place where what he wanted to accomplish in the space and what I've been trying to do for the last 20 years had a lot of synergy to it, which was to think about, if you were going to start over in quick service restaurants with the benefit of 50 years of hindsight and say, let's build something for the next 50 years, what should that look like? And for him, it was really all about options and creating access to this type of food. And for me, it was changing the employment experience for the folks in that space. And the merger of those two ideas is what you see today showing up in the world as Heart House.
So bring me back to crypto. This was a meeting that was planned in advance?
Yes.
So had you been asked to be the CEO?
Yes. And so I had met some of the other investors around the hoop with the brand, some of Kevin's business partners. And the last step in the process was really for he and I to sit down and just talk and get to meet one another and figure out whether there was connective tissue there. And so it was kind of a fascinating experience to be able to sit down, talk shop about a business. And I think, I was struck with the fact that he was very self-aware that restaurants were not his business. And so he was really looking for somebody who was coming from a restaurant background, but not beholden to the past of what people had done in restaurants historically, and could take a look at what that might mean with a fresh perspective.
So bring us into the lead up to this meeting. I mean, you're talking to your family, talking to your friends.
Yeah.
It's kind of an important deal.
Yeah. Although I will say, from my perspective, the foundation of great restaurants is great operations. And so Kevin is really a force multiplier on top of whatever you create. And so I've always treated running restaurants as a business as first and foremost, starting with that, the shift leader that's closing a restaurant on Sunday night. Like that's where the rubber meets the road, not on Instagram or on TikTok or, in Kevin's case, worldwide on billboards and commercials everywhere. It really comes down to when somebody walks in the front door to that restaurant, like, is this something that's going to keep them coming back? And so, as it might seem nerve-wracking, but in many respects, it was very simple because it was like, well, I know how to do that piece of it. And so if the freedom and the empowerment to build a great team to do what we know needs to be done operationally can be done, then the force multiplier of somebody with 160 million followers on top of that is going to unlock a pretty low customer acquisition cost for the brand over time. And so that was the thesis. And I think, he sees that, came into this very clear-headed about what he wanted to do from a food perspective. And, the marriage is working.
You said 160. I have 276 million. Maybe my
math that's across like all platforms. Yeah, I was just going
platforms. I mean,
we're
talking
Instagram.
170 million on
Instagram.
Crazy. He has 37 million on Twitter, 34 million on TikTok, 36 million on Facebook, and those are just the big ones that we're talking about, not to mention everything else. When you deal with a mega star like Kevin, and you meet Kevin, and now you're entrusted with his brand in the food space, where does that put you?
I think for one of the first things is there just has to be communication. And so, there's often a lot of like back and forth of, shoot this piece of content here. Hey, I saw this. Did you see this? What do you think of this? I think, you have to be realistic too, and understand that you're likely going to get things in fits and starts, right? And so like when he's available, you dive in and you go for it. And it might be for 15 minutes or 20 minutes at that point in time, but you take the attention and say, let's go. One of the things that makes him tick is that he just has this, if not me, then who type of attitude to everything that he does that has, I think, affected him since day one of coming onto the scene as a stand-up comedian, which is someone or something has put him into the room. And so once he's in the room, he's going to go figure out like what's in the next room. Like he's not going to stop. And I think that informs a lot of the ideation that goes on with the brand. It's like, well, we're here. Why not push it further? Well, we have this, like we have 250 million people's eyeballs on this thing. Like, why not do something that somebody without that agency would never be able to contemplate?
So bring us into the brand mission. What is the mission? What is the pitch? What are you guys selling?
Yeah, I think the pitch is that this is plant-based food for the people. And what that means is not for the select few or for celebrities or for LA or for those who can afford it, but it's the idea of if you were going to make that menu widely accessible, what would you need to do to have it have the broadest possible appeal? And, I think about QSR juggernauts like McDonald's, for example, and, the mix of what they're putting out there into the universe is not just number of units or accessibility of those physical spaces, but it's how it's priced, who it's marketed towards, who's included in that, who you can see on the other side of the counter as a reflection of you. And, that's the way that we're thinking about Heart House, that this is a plant-based for the people opportunity to take food that is objectively delicious in its own right, that just so happens to be made from something different than it's normally made from, and taking it out there and making it ubiquitous, widely accepted, and widely adopted.
Huge news. Toast, our primary technology partner at our barbecue restaurants in San Diego, and the primary technology partner of so many of the guests that we have on this show, have announced they are expanding their business offerings with Google. So now if you search on Google Maps and you sign up for Toast Tables or Toast Waitlist, you will have the opportunity to improve the digital hospitality experience of the guest, allow them to book through the maps into the Toast reservation system. One of the biggest difficulties that restaurant guests have is when they search for your restaurant and they want a table, they do not have an easy solution to book a table or to get on a wait list. Toast has just announced that they are expanding their offerings with Google, and they now have introduced Toast tables and Toast reservations. This is huge news for the restaurant industry, huge news for guests, and huge news for you, the restaurant owner. Check out Toast tables today and find out the new integrated solution that they have. This is something that we've wanted for a long time. How do you integrate reservations, wait lists into your point of sale? Toast has done it. Check it out. Bring us into the ideation process of developing the recipes.
Yeah, I think, what's interesting about this is when you're starting in this space, I think you could kind of go one of two ways. There's folks in the quick service restaurant space who are like, let's go broad with the menu. Let's do a lot of things. You're a San Diego guy, so I think Jack in the Box is one of the players that does this very well, right? They go super wide and say, we're going to sell tacos. We're going to sell sourdough jacks. We're going to sell foam heads to put on your antenna of your 1990 Pontiac Grand Am. And that's their brand positioning. And there's really this sort of like, there's something for everyone here. And if there was the opposite end of the spectrum in California, for example, it's In-N-Out, which is like, here's 4 things. We're going to do this every single day. You're going to come to love us and we're going to execute this at the highest possible level. And I think when we looked at it, we said, which of those things is more like what we're trying to do? Because we're doing something different, we're like, let's keep it simple. Like, let's not give somebody 17,000 different options on the menu. Let's go very straightforward. And so this menu was built to be simple and craveable. And the way that products will earn their way onto the menu over time will be if they are objectively delicious products in their own right. And it doesn't change our ability to execute at a high level. So we have 2 main things that we sell: a burger and a chicken sandwich. That's it. A couple of different builds. And of course, over time, we can play with different toppings and things like that. But I think those executed very well so that just a basic, 4-ounce double burger and a basic fried chicken sandwich can capture people's hearts and minds.
How involved was Kevin in the process of these recipes?
Very, yeah. Common question, right? You'd think,
surprisingly,
like, oh, man. Yeah, I think, although not for me based on my initial interactions, but certainly to an outsider's perspective, they would think to themselves, oh, he just, did he just put his name on the front of the building and that's it? He tasted everything. We made changes to the products, frankly, leading right up until the time when we opened our first restaurant last August. And he was tasting every iteration of those to make sure that, not with a veto vote per se, but just from a partnership, right? Like, we're doing the work, and as business partners, we're like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, here it is. Here's it is side by side with what we had before. Here's what I like about it. Do you taste the same thing? And I think what's interesting about our brand from a culinary perspective is that the work is done by a bunch of folks who are not plant-based eaters. Like, we all eat everything.
Yeah.
And it brings this level of scrutiny to it, which is like, would this get me to change knowing how much I love this other thing? And if it wouldn't, then it's not going on the menu, because it has to pass the smell test of, side by side, would I choose this over that, with all the other variables being held constant?
How do you build a team?
Ooh, it's a simple question with probably a complicated answer, but I think the shortest summary to that is trust. I think trust and time. For me personally, I have the good fortune of having done this for 20 years in the space. And so I've got a Rolodex of people who are outstanding technical subject matter experts and team builders themselves in each one of the different functional areas that it takes to build a restaurant business. And most of my career for early days was actually in the people function. I was an HR leader by trade. And so I have this kind of weird, like, I don't really have a technical discipline as a CEO. Like, I didn't come up as the CFO.
A human discipline.
Right. But yeah, one of the things that's amazing about that in the restaurant space is that restaurants are all a function of team building and people. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more and more and more leaders in the space coming out of people functions, particularly in high growth restaurant companies, because often the biggest governor to the growth of a business is how well you can develop and ready new leaders to take on those new units when you open them.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. I was a sociology major. I planned to study business, but I was never inspired by anything that the business classes I took. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have this show, is to give people access and seat at the table, to let them listen into conversations of how do you build these incredible brands and where do they go. When you look back at your time at Burger King, what did you learn? What was the greatest lesson that you learned working for a company like that?
Wow. I spent a decade there, and I was fortunate enough to be there during a ton of change. When I was there, Burger King was privately held by, portfolio company of Diageo at the time, which was publicly traded. It was taken private and kind of like reconstituted, reinvigorated for users that are old, listeners who are old enough to remember. That's when the Creepy King made the comeback, and it was like very central there through the mid 2000s. The company ended up going public, and then ultimately taken private again. And throughout all of those changes, I had the good fortune to spend time in both the company side of the business, the franchise side of the business, inside the United States and around the world. The thing I learned is that franchising, in particular, like single franchisees, like that is what makes a great business. Like individual small business owners and operators are where the rubber meets the road. And, the thing that kind of struck me is, in this gigantic company of 13,000 restaurants, the restaurant general manager was the most important person in every single case, in every single one of those 13,000 restaurants, whether they were clean and safe, whether the guest experience was great, whether the Whoppers tasted and looked like the photo on the menu or not. It all came down to the leadership at the unit level. And I think you can see that today if you look outside of Burger King at people who are just killing it in the space. I think about Chick-fil-A as this model of every one of those franchisees is in his or her restaurant most of those 6 days out of the week. And you can tell because they're doing $8 million a box.
What is the plan for Heart House as you guys grow, looking at the Chick-fil-A model and looking at what you want to build?
Yeah, I think just like we're doing with the food, we're doing the same thing with the professional development thesis and the employment experience at Heart House. We're sort of starting with the blank page and saying, what would it look like if we took the best of Chick-fil-A, the best of Outback's managing partner program, the best of what Darden has done to build their brand with full service over time, the best of what Cheesecake Factory did with their single unit operators, and rolled that all into a job that gave real equity to the people managing these units. And I think, thinking about, instead of what can we afford to pay and being limited by trying to keep labor low, we're like, if we put this in, what would we be able to achieve? And thinking about it more as an investment thesis than a cost management approach. And, I'm excited. We only have 2 today, but we're already playing around with that and thinking about, when we've got 200 of these, how do we want the partnership and sort of equity model to look? And it's definitely going to be something that the industry hasn't seen before.
Prior to opening the first Heart House, how many restaurants had you opened?
I'd probably maybe a couple hundred.
Couple hundred.
Yeah.
What made this one different?
It was number one. I mean, like
it was the first one.
Yeah, it was the first one. I'd say the craziest part about that first restaurant opening was we had done all of this work, and Kevin is the megaphone for this. And like we believe that we've gotten out the word. We've got, 30,000 followers without even a restaurant open at the time. Every time the truck shows up someplace in Southern California, people show up. But the night I went to bed before we opened, I was still nervous. I was like, is anybody going to come? Right? Like, is anybody going to show up tomorrow?
It's amazing.
And I got to the restaurant at like 7:30. We opened at 11. We're doing a ribbon cutting at 11 and then inviting the whole general public in at 11:30 that first day. And I roll up to the restaurant at like 7:15 and there are people camped outside the restaurant. And the first couple in line has an infant daughter, and they've driven from like Palm Desert or something like that out to LAX to come to the restaurant. And they're sitting there, big smiles on their face, saying, like, we wouldn't miss this. We had to come check it out. And for that first day, we were lined all the way down the block, all the way to the next traffic light, out the door, having to control people and like capacity with the fire marshal of people coming into the dining room, giving them tokens and like collecting tokens as if this was like Disneyland. And I was just having this moment saying, okay, I think we're going to be all right. Like, I think this is going to work. And kind of this collective sigh of relief. But I genuinely, sure as day, like I just didn't know what was going to happen because we didn't have a hard house at that point in time and didn't know how the world would ultimately show up. And they did.
So every restaurant owner that's listening to this, we all have been at the negative reviews. How have you responded to negative reviews?
It's interesting. We've been trying to find them proactively as much as we can in restaurant, because so much of this depends upon our ability to change those detractors to promoters, from an NPS perspective, because we're not just serving somebody burgers and chicken sandwiches. We're serving them that, but made from plants. And people are used to seeing plant-based food being more expensive. Ours is priced sort of commensurate with their animal protein-based counterparts. And so we're weeding through all of it, because what we're built, there's no point in us doing this as a brand, certainly with Kevin, if we're going to do 5 of these. Like, it would just be a hobby. We're trying to crack the code on how do you do 5,000 of them. And so every piece of critical feedback is so important to us right now, because it helps us figure out, when somebody tastes the plant-based burger and they're like, yeah, it's good. It's better than what I've had before, because we're not using sort of the major players that you see everywhere else. These are our own recipes and partnerships that are germane to Hard House. And we look for like people who are like, yeah, it's great. But like, for me, the most important feedback kind of lies not in the person who just had a bad experience for the day, because like bad service as an operator, you're like, okay, we made a mistake, we'll make it right. But it's the person who's sort of like, yeah, it was pretty good. And then they don't come back and they don't tell you what was wrong. And so we've been going pretty hard at that, because part of the proof of concept of starting something like this is figuring out what is causing people, if it is, not to come back. Now, the good news for us is, our top box on our guest feedback surveys right now, we're running in March, we ran 80% top box guest feedback in the restaurant for us, which puts the NPS in the business kind of in the low 70s, which is awesome from an NPS perspective. So that means people are getting a great experience in the restaurant.
Tell me more about NPS for those that don't know. Why is it important? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one measure, but one that I think you can benchmark fairly easily against other folks in the space if you're trying as a restaurant operator to figure out what's happening. And the best way I can summarize it tightly is you're measuring the difference between the people who are enthusiastic supporters of your brand with those that are likely telling folks not to go there. And so if you take a 5-point rating scale, let's say, or you blow it out to a 10-point rating scale, you're taking all of the 10s or all of the 5s, and you're subtracting the 3s, 2s, and 1s from that. And so in our case, last month, we ran 79% 5s, about 8% 1s, 2s, and 3s. So that gave us a 71 as a net promoter score for the month of March.
For you, for the net promoter score, you said you're digging into the data, you're scraping the data, trying to find these bad reviews. Is there any proprietary technology you're using, or is there something in your stack that's allowing you to, and by stack, I mean your restaurant technology stack?
Yeah, I mean, our partner right now for guest feedback is Tattle. They're a great partner. I mean, I think there are other people also doing great work in the space. And for me, it's less about that and more about the fact that you have a good partnership as an operator with whomever you're working, big companies and partnerships with people like In Moment or SMG, or smaller businesses with things like Ovation or Tattle. I think the tool is a tool. I like to think of all of these as tools. They're kind of, you hand a tool to a mechanic, something gets fixed.
Yes.
You hand a tool to a criminal and somebody gets hurt. In our case, we're focused on making mechanics more than we are making new screwdrivers, for example.
Yeah, that's one of the theses that we have on the show is what we call digital hospitality. It's understanding what's the technology that's going to allow us to make happier guests and make more memorable moments. When you look at how people are consuming the food, how do you look at that? Just in store, out store, delivery? I mean, there's so many different ways that people can consume. Are you eventually going to be doing nationwide shipping? What's the plan?
Yeah, I mean, so we were very intentional out of the gate on focusing all of our trial in restaurant. So some people are taking to go, of course.
Yeah.
But when the line is out the door and down the block, that even if you want to do digital ordering, like I think the best thing you can do that we could do at that point in time was just satisfy that demand at the highest possible level, because these are folks that were already going out of their way to come to us.
Yeah.
As that has normalized and we've fallen into a more kind of consistent cadence operationally, we're now starting to layer on all of these additional channels. And so, we're doing digital ordering right now, but only for pickup. And ultimately we'll expand to delivery as well, and partnerships with marketplaces and other aggregators. But along the way, because we're making sure that our product is being consumed the way we intend it, and we're then sort of introducing this variance along the way, it's giving us a good opportunity to figure out like where that breaks down. Is it packaging? Is it the product itself? Is it the build of a sandwich? Is it the diameter of a French fry? Things that you would never really sort of think about in the same way if you're focused on a single channel. But over time, for listeners who serve French fries like we do, for example, the heat retention is very different on a 1/4 inch versus a 3/8 inch versus a 5/16 inch French fry. And so you start playing around with the differences there between, well, it holds heat better, but you sort of lose the kind of classic McDonald's shoestring characteristics that are commensurate with that 1/4 inch cut. And by doing it and sort of introducing variables one at a time and measuring that, it gives you the opportunity to figure out where the cost benefit might tilt in your favor one way or another.
Out of everything you do in a given day, what do you enjoy doing the most?
Oh, I think one of my favorite things to do is to just be in restaurant talking to the team and talking to customers. It's just at this stage, it's still so intimate, with a couple of restaurants and a couple more on the way, that I'm just kind of savoring that, because I know one day when there's 200 of them, that like the idea of working a shift in a restaurant is going to have so many other competing priorities, that right now there's just the inherent flexibility to dig in and ask real questions and connect with folks without worrying about what's sort of sitting it to the side, in exchange for that.
Where did you learn how to ask questions?
I mean, certainly just from a pure technical perspective, when you spend your career in human resources to begin, you do a lot of questions. And you learn how to ask questions in a way that gets you to the heart of what you're looking for. And the way to do that is you ask a lot of bad questions or ineffective questions over time, and get better and notice how much more efficient you can be when that becomes a muscle you get to use often.
Do you have any stories of mentors in the hospitality space, people that have taught you something that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the folks that had a profound impact on my career was a guy that I worked with both at Burger King and then ultimately at Cafe Rio, where I went afterwards. His name is Dave Gagnon. Dave ran company operations for Burger King for a period of time, and then he was the CEO for the entire time that I was at Cafe Rio. And Dave was an operator, like if the sports equivalent of like the player's coach, like that was Dave. He was no frills, straightforward, no BS, but also a heart of gold and so compassionate. And I think this really high level of empathy for frontline workers, because he himself had started, as a frontline bartender and server in a full service space and worked his way up through each of those positions over the course of decades, being an assistant manager and a, nighttime kitchen manager and a general manager. And I think the thing that Dave imparted on all of us was how important it was to have a culture that supported operators. And there's so many big companies out there where the client at the end of the day for all the things you do in corporate jobs kind of gets lost. And he was able to maintain this very entrepreneurial mindset, even in companies that got big and bureaucratic, in a way where everybody understood that what you were doing every day was trying to figure out how to make that Sunday shift leader's night easier. And I think that's really important for entrepreneurs today, because the amount of technology and tools, SaaS tools, providers, everything that we've got at our fingertips is like 10x what it was 2 decades ago. And the filter shouldn't just be like, is this stuff cool? Does it look good in a deck? Can I talk about it on stage at a conference? But it should be like, show me how that makes that person's life better.
Yes.
And I was talking to a colleague in the space about this, a couple of months ago, about the proliferation of AI and like, what do you want to see automated? And there's so much discussion about like, if you look at like robotics, like let's automate fries and let's automate this. But what's interesting is if you ask frontline employees, they want you to like help them close the restaurant faster after the last guest leaves.
Right.
Or they want to have a better, shelf to sheet inventory process. And so as leaders, we should be looking for all the things that remove friction for them, not just the things that like look great on a dashboard. And that comes from that same mentality that Dave kind of instilled decades ago, which was about thinking about that person on the front line and like, how am I going to make their job easier today?
It goes back to asking questions.
It does.
If you're willing to ask the questions that no other people are willing to ask, you might find answers that can actually move your business forward.
Indeed.
What inspires you when you go to these industry conferences and you hear the things that are getting presented?
Truly, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot inspires
I want
me.
Honesty. Truth vibrates the fastest.
Yeah.
Tell me why. How can we improve?
Well, I think there are a lot of conferences that historically, I think we're starting to change a little bit right now for the better, which is good. But I think there are some conferences in the restaurant space that are a little tired and are kind of, parading out some of the similar things and a lot of like strategy pontification and stuff. And I think what's missing and what is inspiring is when a real leader stands up in front and shares real tactics and real results. If you're in a big corporate environment, you're going to get access to some of that stuff. But for smaller operators who are like spending $1,500 of their hard-earned profit to like go hit the trail and go to a conference to try to learn something to take back. Anytime a leader gets up there and says, here's what I did, here's how it affected my business, here's how it showed up at the bottom of my P&L, and they're willing to share that. And it's not this like, I've got this secret and I'm not going to share it with you. That's inspiring to me because I know that that's actually going to change that person's, business when they go home.
So as somebody that's worked in the hospitality business as long as you have, we're fortunate that we have not just restaurant owners, but we have people in marketing and people in sales in the hospitality space that listen to this show. How can the people in sales be more empathetic to the people in the restaurant business?
I think right now it starts with the acknowledgement that tying back whatever they're selling to a business to how it's going to reduce friction at the customer employee level in some way, shape, or form. If anybody has seen what it's like to work as a frontline employee in the restaurant business over the last few years, I think I'm probably speaking in a generality that most people could sign up for. But, working in restaurants has gotten harder the last couple of years, not easier. Our teams were the front lines of essential workers during a time when people were freaked out and didn't know what was happening in the world. And they are now the front lines of having to manage all of these different things coming at them and the pace of technology changing and everything else. And if sales folks can really help operators understand what things they can stop doing by utilizing those tools, I think that's really helpful because general managers feel like every time a new tool is given to them, it's one more thing going on their plate, one more thing to learn, one more thing to have to manage when they onboard, and helping folks figure out how to edit in addition to adding or to subtract in addition to adding, I think is an important part of generating that empathy that you're talking about.
So we believe in smartphone storytelling. We're a barbecue brand that became a media brand. We have all this incredible technology at our fingertips. If we're willing to share the story of who our business is, what our restaurant does. It's crazy to me that this is a show on entrepreneur. We have so many incredible entrepreneurs, restaurant owners that literally created these incredible businesses, but we also have a creator economy. So we have people that are really good at telling stories on the internet, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or podcasters. So we're in this incredible spot where we're in 2023, the amount of people that tell me that they believe in the internet, and yet their actions and their businesses don't back up that fact because they don't have a mobile first website or they're not publishing content on social. For me, I'd love to get a little insight into Andy and your smartphone usage. So are you an iPhone or an Android user?
I'm an iPhone user.
Most current version. Which version are you?
I think I have the I think I have the 13. So I'm not all the way up to date. Yeah.
Okay, not all the way up to date. Are you a photos or videos guy?
Both. Definitely both.
What's your favorite app?
Ooh. Probably YouTube.
YouTube. What's your least favorite communication tool? Which do you not want to get notifications on?
I don't know. Maybe email.
Email.
Yeah.
Or do you guys use Slack?
We do.
Your
Yep.
Slack organization? There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Spotify or Apple Music?
Both.
Both. Instagram or Facebook?
Instagram.
And finally, do you like to have phone calls or text messages?
Both. Definitely both.
Definitely both. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, every single week on Wednesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we host a show on Clubhouse. Please join us. It's 10 a.m. Pacific time. We have digital hospitality leaders from all over the globe, but we would love for you, the listener, to come on stage, tell us the story of your restaurant, tell us what's going on. Every week we do a social shout out. This week's going to Troy Hooper, who is always on stage. He is always sharing his wisdom. He has been telling me since we started this show, since Andy became CEO of Hard House, that we needed to have Andy on Restaurant Influencers, and here he is. So shout out to Troy. But Andy, I wanted to give you a chance. I know every time I put a CEO on the spot to give one person a shout out, they want to shout out the entire team. But can you, this is going on Entrepreneur, can you give me one person that's gone above and beyond for Hard House and the brand?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Bridget Siegel, who's the chief operating officer here.
Awesome.
Bridget's just done an incredible job of both digging into how to build an operating culture from the beginning here with a couple of restaurants. But I think she's also the kind of rare unicorn that comes to the party with a mix of both operating and culinary and financial analysis chops. Like, you have somebody who's been the general manager of a business, but also graduated with a pastry degree, used to be an investment banker, and also has a track record of building incredible teams at the restaurant level. And I think without her partnership, it would be difficult to imagine us being able to build what we're trying to build here at Hard House.
I love it. So if you guys want to get in touch with me, it's at Shawn P. Walchef, SHAWN PWALCHEF. If you know a restaurant influencer, no matter where they are in the globe, we want to hear their story. Special shout out to Toast. Thank you for believing in storytelling. Thank you for powering our barbecue restaurants and so many of the restaurants we have on this show. Andy, how can people follow the brand? What's the best thing for them to do? Are you hiring? What give us the full playbook of what's happening at Hard House.
Yeah, I think the best way to stay in touch with us is to follow us on our social. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. Check us out online to myhearthouse.com. we're doing as much as we possibly can to put our life out there and tell stories through that mobile device that you mentioned, Sean. And one of the great parts about the creator economy is when you have a business partner who is himself a creator, it makes this natural synergy for the brand to be able to show up in a really organic way. And so, I'd encourage folks to engage, to let us know what they think when they see the brand show up, and to give us ideas about how they think we could be even better at delivering on our mission of bringing plant-based food to the people.
How soon can we expect a Heart House in San Diego?
Soon.
Ooh, you like that? Well, we'll be there. We'll figure that out, and we'll make sure
Excellent.
we're there. We can't wait. Thank you, Andy. We appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening. We are grateful, and we will catch you all next week. Thank you for listening to Restaurant Influencers. The best way that you can help us with the show is to subscribe and write a review. We love the opportunity to connect with you, no matter where you are on the globe, no matter what restaurant you are running. Please send us a DM on social at Sean P. Walchef. If you are interested in Toast, if you want to improve your digital hospitality, please send me a DM. I will get you in touch with a local Toast representative. We appreciate you listening to this show. The best way that you can help the show is share it with a friend, and we will catch you all next week, or we will see you on one of the digital playgrounds that we call social media.